So, Victoria, what an honor. It is such an honor to have you on our Community of Practice channel here on YouTube. And on behalf of SETSI, we want to thank you so much for your leadership today.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. So, as always, we begin by acknowledging the original stewards of the various lands that we are on. We also acknowledge our ancestors. We acknowledge all those who toiled without compassion or compensation. We acknowledge all the elders and community stalwarts whose shoulders we stand on as we build, share, learn together for our collective liberation and sovereignty. So, if you can please do us the honors by introducing yourself to our listeners and viewers and tell us about your amazing work.
Well, I'm Victoria Hurth. I am an independent pracademic, which means that I span academia and practice very deliberately and have done for quite some time in order to really boundary span different parts of the system, both in terms of geographic system, layers, sections, but also bridging different disciplines, different languages that we're speaking to try to get under the surface. In a way, we've become very good at looking at things that are different. And if you look at the average university, it really reflects that human drive for saying, yeah, but that's different from that. So let's go and study that. And there's huge value, but not if you don't have boundary spanning in order to, and that's why we talk about interdisciplinarity. So I'm really trying to deliberately take that space, and for the last 3 decades doing it in a way that now I can be in real service to society, to see the wood for the trees. So to see not just the things that are separate stuff, but to say what's just are we taking for granted that's just sitting there that we are losing because we are not verbalizing and clarifying that this is what we really mean. And then using standards building to help test that, because it's all very well for me to have say, right, okay, after 25 years on a particular topic, well, parts of the unsustainability system, I now see that we're all saying pretty much the same thing. I mean, that's kind of not that useful unless it can be used to help generate a greater sense of confidence and forward momentum, and give us a shared framework. And the standards building work I do really test that, and it helps shortcut the global community by me saying, look, I think we're saying this. Are we saying this, or are we saying something different? And in my experience, that really works. So that's the bit I'm in service to, because there aren't so many boundary spanners, certainly not that have done it for such a long time. So yeah, that's me really.
Wow, that's beautiful and so powerful. We thank you for this, for your work. Um, can you articulate just your personal mission and vision and what inspires you about the work you do?
Well, I mean, my personal, I mean, it's very deep in me since I was born, I suppose. I don't know, but it was when I was about 13. I was lucky. I had a really fantastic family. We didn't have much money. I really knew what a good life was. And I used to have to walk 1.5 miles to a bus stop every day to get and back again. And that for me was thinking time, and it was reflection time. And it was basically a form of meditation, like gratitude meditation. And I would list all the things that I was so grateful for. And because I grew up in a religious school, we were having to say bidding prayers every week at least, and that would be in the context of those who are less fortunate, reflecting on them, really bringing them into our lives. And when you're very young and you have those sorts of conditions, it became really clear to me how lucky that I was, and how that was just pure chance. And in that assessment, I was about 13, where I really crystallized and verbalized the foundation of my purpose in the world, which is that I said to myself, this was on one of those walks to the bus stop, I said, wow, I think I could take a guess that I've had more happiness and, so a great life compared by 13 than most people, even if they live to 90. So I've already won in the lottery of life, and I didn't do anything to deserve that. I've had such an amazing time, and my goal is now to give back. and to make sure that on that balance of payments, if when I'm on my deathbed, that I am in a positive balance. Now, that's an art to try to assess that, but that was my commitment at that point. And what that did was free me from the fear. I wasn't trying to gain anything. I wasn't trying to keep up with anything. I'd already won. So, which meant that if I died then, I'd be like, okay, I had a good innings. And there's something very freeing about that because, and whenever I start to feel like I lose track slightly, I just remind myself of that everything is a bonus. And so I have nothing to lose and I have everything to offer. So that's what really where it comes from. And then I would ask, obviously, like I say, I'm not a practicing Christian. I think Jesus was a great guy as a prophet, as whatever. But it meant that I was, practiced. I was taken to church every week, did prayers at night, and I would always ask for four things my whole life. And that explains really because my whole life has been following that. So the first is to understand what's going wrong, because it was very, very clear to me that adults were making very bad decisions. I was always very analytical, philosophical, really kind of not going along with what adults were doing and saying, but just observing them and holding that sense of innocent. And I still do that now. Like, I don't understand. Can you please explain to me? So I wanted to understand what was wrong. I just knew something was wrong. I didn't know what precisely. I wanted to know what could be done about it. I wanted to know the role that I should play in that. And I wanted to, and then this was my ask for what I wanted to be given, which was the skills and capacity to act on that prior information. Because I was always really searching for it's all very well and good to understand that something's wrong. It's all very well and good to understand what's wrong. But if you're not clear the role that you can play and you can play it to your best, then that's quite a tortuous position. And one of the things that drives me is the understanding that so many people, like every day, more and more people fall into that position. And I've been there. I've been in that dark place where I understand deeply what we have lost and what we're losing, but have all this energy, but nowhere to put it. And I think of all those people stuck in jobs, of which are the majority, that just start to understand that what they're doing every single day is fueling a future that they don't want. But that sense of, well, what do I do about it? And so really, if nothing else, I'm in service to them, to give them a roadmap, to give them a sense of not having to go through 20, 30 years scrambling around in the dark like I had to do, but to say, okay, here, lean on me, lean on those 30 years. We don't have time for that. And try, and it's not easy, but at least you can see and start to think what might be your path.
That is so beautiful to know that you had that passion and purpose at such a young age. How you were talking reminds me of myself. It's like you already kind of had that foundation of kind of who you are, but you still had to blossom. You knew that you were a flower, but you didn't know at what size, how big were your, were each stem or each petal. You were still blossoming into, the person that you are today, and you're continuing to blossom. You're still on this earth. So that means you still have more growth to do. And that's so beautiful that you can transfer that transformation onto others so that they skip a lot of the headaches and a lot of the mistakes. Mistakes are lessons and we need them. But if you can kind of shorten the list, shorten that.
Yeah, it's also the nature of it, really. A lot the people that I'm talking about, we need so many people in the solving the problems, right? Doing the hard work. And that's hard enough. And that takes, growth and change and challenge and everything. At the moment, we're asking them to try and do that without any real clarity, certainly shared, even personal, but shared clarity about what is the nature of what are we trying to solve here? Like, what is the nature of the problem? What's the overall framework? And that's the bit that I'm trying to help crystallize. That's why I say it's the wood for the trees. It's kind of the
Right.
stuff that, and they say there's nothing more practical than a good theory, and a good theory shouldn't create something new. It should open a window on something that's already there that helps you to
Already
see
there.
better. And that's really all that I'm doing. It's a very simple part, but it's so utterly critical because everything else depends on it. So
That's
really,
right.
I suppose, but I just feel for those people trying to A, scramble with solutions, but B, not really have a frame, and certainly not a shared frame to weigh up those solutions, you know?
Absolutely. So that gets into my next questions, like, and you probably touched on, like, what challenges or barriers have you faced in your work, and how were you able to overcome them, or still in the process of overcoming them?
Um, I think it's sort of reflected throughout everything, really. It's just having some very simple foundations that you can, that I can lean back on. I explained before that sense of, if ever anything gets tough, it's like, well, let's just remind yourself, you could have died at 13 and you'd have been happy. So, you know, get on with it, sort of thing. It's I think what really helps, and I think a lot of people are not there, and I think they need to be, is to give themselves time to go through what I call waves of knowing around this issue. We now have professionalized, mainstreamed a lot of the language around a sustainable world, long-term well-being for all, as I would call it. But a lot of people, therefore, maybe open one box of, say, at least 30 major ones, and then go down the road of trying to deliver on what's in that box in a quite mechanical or professionalized way. And the reality is that you have to be fully engaged and be able to stay the path, really give yourself time to engage with and accept the level of destruction that we are doing to ourselves, the scale of it, the vastness of it, the number of years that it's been happening. And that takes time. That means going and it'll be different for everybody, but the more you can scattergun it, going on retreats that are quite reflective, going into and studying a master's, or I know not everyone has that luxury, even just, YouTube videos. It doesn't matter what it is, but it's until you get to that point that you have grieved, as in, sometimes, by the way, fireworks go off. I never know when to make them happen, but they just happen. So who knows what. But yeah, that sort of sense of bottoming out, like getting to the point, metaphorically or actually, where you're sitting in a corner, bawling your eyes out because you have accepted the the failures that we have made as humanity in this amazingly beautiful planet of ours, and continue to make. And the reason why that matters is because once you've bottomed it out, you're able to, for example, know where to go to focus on the data and the science that will fuel that, because you look at that data and science and you don't just see data and science, you see consequences and you internalize them. And every time you see that data, it means something. It has emotional meaning. Um, so that's really important. But it's also really important because when things get tough, and now for me, it happens like almost in a split second. Like if everyone says, well, why are you so hopeful? And I'm like, well, because there isn't any other way to show up, right? Because if I go through the pattern, and this is the bit that now happens in a microsecond, is okay, so this is a blocker. And if we don't do that, then that, and then, collapse, and then what? So what can I do? So I can sit and cry in a corner, or I can engage. And what's the point of sitting and crying in a corner, right? So there is no way forward but action. That's first. The second really then important thing that has fueled me. So that was another thing, like bottom it out, get emotionally connected with what you're doing, because that will be your fuel and it will sustain you. And realize, don't spend too long in the road towards being in the corner of the room crying, because once you get there, you're going to get up and walk forward. So just try and make that as quick as you possibly can. Um, and yeah, so that has really supported me. And there was one other thing that I was going to say. Oh yeah, it's the fact that, and that's the work that I do, that sort of foundational stuff that connects things and gets underneath. You realize that whatever scenario unfolds, we're going to need that, right? So being able to govern ourselves in a way that optimizes long-term well-being for all and doesn't destroy it, that's in essence, that what we need to do. And then what the work I do is helping to describe what governance would make that happen. We need that, whatever. We could go through the worst collapse scenario, and unless literally there are no more humans on planet Earth, we're going to have to organize. We're going to have to govern ourselves, firstly, right? Because that system of governance goes all the way to ourselves. But we're also going to have to come together in communities and do that. So again, getting to that point where it's like, well, actually, these things don't matter because I can ground myself to something I know that does. The science and the system collapses matter because they are driving everything, and they are what we are emotionally connected to. They matter. Being able to make decisions collectively in a way that's aligned with our collective well-being matters regardless, right? So having those like points that where the chaos happens, you can stick to, really helps. So yeah, in a way, what has helped me is what I'm now in turn trying to help others with.
Help others. Yes, and that's how we learn, We learn from our own and we pass and share the knowledge. I think that's what makes us a very impactful community. So, do you have any key priorities you're working on right now or anything you want to amplify at this time?
Uh, well, this is the thing. This is what makes me very consistent and boring is no, I'm working on the same thing I did since I was a teenager, which is trying to work out why we make such stupid decisions and how not to. But in that, though, it is interesting because, I'm 48 now. So when I say like three, that's what I mean. I mean, going back to that point, it was since 2002 that really I brought sustainability and sustainable business together. Um, and yeah, but it's culminated. It's kind of funny that it's culminated in these two things that support each other happening at precisely the same time. But each of them have very long tails. So it's interesting that they have come together at the same time. And the first is a book. And I'd held off writing a book for a long time because they can be vanity projects. They can be, oh, let's write a book. And I'm very careful about how I use my time, and it has to be in a way that is based on my system analysis going to have the most impact. So traditionally in the past, for example, I've kind of published through, for example, CISL, the Cambridge University Institute for Sustainability Leadership, because I know by doing that it would have much more impact, etc. And at that point, I could have gone and put that in the book. But it came to the point where it just became clear that it needed to be in a book. Like this needed to be done in a way that wasn't a podcast or a video, or it was people's ability. And there's something about books to be able to like sit on holiday or as you go to bed and digest slowly, but in a way where everything is together. So it's like one complete story. And we handed in the manuscript for that in January, and it should be published in October. And we have a LinkedIn group. So on my LinkedIn profile underneath, you can see the group. It's like a community update group. So I would love, everyone, and please spread the word so that people can kind of be on that journey with us, really, I suppose, because it is a strategy for impact. And the second thing in this journey is the international standard in purpose-driven organizations. So I've sort of alluded to that before, but that really is that ultimate. When I talked about testing the consensus and pinning down what does it mean to do governance behaviors that optimize for long-term well-being for all and do not destroy long-term well-being for all in the process. That's the ultimate governance frame that anyone who's acting needs to act within, in my view, because if you're using shared resources, then we should be doing our very best job with those shared resources for the good of everyone. And if we are destroying other things at the same time, then that for long-term well-being for all, then that doesn't make sense. And really, that's at the heart of our problems. We're taking resources and we're not optimizing long-term well-being for all. Sometimes we're destroying, or often we're destroying them for profit, for individual gain. And while we're doing that, so even if, like, for example, a charity might be doing something great, but they could be destroying lots of other things in the process unwittingly. So yeah, the standard essentially pins that down. It also pins down, like the book does, why purpose-driven organizations are paradigmatically different in terms of economic theory and how, the role of organizations in the world. So yeah, common language, shared framework, the credible confidence to be able to, for example, go to all governments and say, your mandate is to be purpose-driven because your mandate is to deliver collective long-term well-being. So if that's the case, like, how do you stack up against this standard? You know, that is massively. So I think that what will occur as a result of the ISO, you know, people sometimes think about ISOs and standards and they think rules and they think boring and they think, unimportant, but honestly, I think it is one of the most powerful tools we have. And when we think about laws and regulation, they come from a normative sense that something needs to be put into law. How do you create that norm? How do you crystallize it? How do you show that it's needed to be in law? So yes, we need laws, but we absolutely need standards, voluntary standards for people to come together to crystallize what it is that we want in law. So that's where I see that going. But just maybe also just to clarify slightly, when I say that's the end of a long journey, before the international standard, which, like I say, we're right in the middle of, will be published next year. And please join the LinkedIn group for that as well. It's ISO 3711, ISO 37011. But for that to exist, first of all, there was what is the working draft, which is the British standard in purpose-driven organizations, PAS 808. That I was the technical author for, and was came through the British. There are 172 national standards bodies in the world, which means 172 countries have a formalized way into the ISO process, and you can also come in as a liaison. So it's, like I say, one of the perhaps the most multi-stakeholder participatory consensus building process that exists. So British standard came in, and that enabled us to be able to really move forward on the ISO. But prior to that was the 5 years it took to build ISO 37000, which is the very first multi-stakeholder view on governance of organizations, like ever really, that covers all organizations across the world, including government as an organization, but from the biggest businesses to the smallest, one-person organization. Prior to that, the idea of governance, even though it goes back to Plato, really grew up as a discipline within the area of what I call logic one, short-term financial self-interest approach to economics and governance and management. That means that our most important tool for change, for structuring decision-making, that is governance, was co-opted by the very problem that we have. And so until we freed that from that and said, no, the foundations of governance are this. And now that without that, I don't know that we could have really built a standard on purpose-driven governance. We might have been able to build a standard on purpose, but what would that be? It'd be useless. And this, in a way, is my message. It's like, if we have some good ideas about how we want the future to be, if we're not immediately anchoring those ideas against how do we change governance of organizations so that those ideas are embedded in routine decision making, then we are creating systematically a set of nice hopes sitting along the side that never enter the actual fundamentals. And if we use that lens to ask why 30 years later, and all this effort and all these plans and all these chief sustainability officers, are we ending up where we are with the metrics still going in the wrong direction? For me, that is the wood for the trees.
Powerful. Wow, Victoria, this is so powerful. You really, encompass a lot of the questions I had, like just a couple other ones. So let's do this. Give me, what does success look like to you? And give us your call to action, because I know that's pivotal for people to really understand your purpose and your passion. Like, what does success look like to you? Um,
For me personally, or for everyone? Like for the
um,
world? Or me?
Yeah, let's just say that, because the other question was like, how do you feel about the future of social impact? So, what's that successful model, and what
Okay.
do we look for as far as the calls to action? I think that kind of blends in.
Okay. So this is simple really, because and my last answer sort of set that up. Success looks like when no organization is misaligned with long-term well-being for all, either not harming it, but optimizing for it, because just taking resources and doing no harm is not an innovation agenda. It should never be, certainly shouldn't be now. So if every organization that exists, that is allowed to exist, to take our precious shared resources and do something with them, basically are aligning with ISO 3711, because that's what it will specify. And if we have organization, if we decide that we are okay with some organizations being misaligned with that, maybe because of a transition we want to go through, maybe because of a state of perpetual reality, then that needs to be successful, look like that being a conscious decision done with eyes wide open, that is collectively decided on. We are okay, and us lot over here as organizations are going to have to do extra work to protect long-term well-being for all, because we know that you're destroying it in these very precise ways, and it's consciously done. And we are so far from that precise, clear, conscious decision making. It is unreal. And given our toes are over cliffs as humanity, it is incredible we're so far away from getting those basics in place. And again, so success looks like, even like first level success, eyes wide open. If we're going to go over the cliff, let's do it consciously, because we can see the cliff, right? So let's not like be totally stupid about it. Next best success is not going over the cliff, because we have consciously decided how to make decisions differently. So yeah, that would be, and then my call to action would be, get involved in the ISO. It's happening now, 172 countries. Like if you want to get involved and you don't know where your national member body is, then write to the secretary of the technical committee, TC 309, or get in touch with me, and you will be able to understand what those routes to setting up a mirror committee are, or if one already exists and you can just join. Or if you are a member of a liaison organization, or because there are certain rules around who can get involved. But if you are part of, like, I don't know, a membership group or something, they might well hit the criteria to become a liaison organization, and that's another route in. So that's my call to action, really. Get involved. Now, if, of course, you can't get involved in the actual building of the standard and the co-creation of it, that's also fine. Get involved by finding out about it, amplifying it, telling people that it's going to exist, preempting, going and look at the British standard in purpose-driven organizations that's freely available, download it, start to get to grips with it, be prepared, be organized for how we're going to use that standard to really provoke change. I gave an example there earlier about asking your governments, why are you not, are you purpose-driven? Like, how are you governed? And I can guarantee you most governments, if you ask them what is governance, I think they might struggle. And that's not to put a downer on them. I'd say our governance literacy is terrible at the moment. But the major point is we all have to become literate in governance. So that's another call for action as well. Get yourself governance literate and be part of the conversation.
Amazing, Victoria. That's why I didn't really jump, because everybody needs to hear what you're saying. And I didn't want to break your train of thought or anything. I want you to just flow. And I really appreciate this on behalf of SETI. We appreciate you so much. Definitely people will get a lot of information, want to get involved. It is so important. And we'll definitely be collabing in the future so that this gets out more and more to all, because collaboration is the key to social change. And we have to really do this. We are laying a foundation. We know that we have to pass the baton. There's more generations to come. So let's do what we can do now in the physical while we still can. So again, thank you so much. And we will close the way that we began, by acknowledging the original stewards of the various lands that we are on. We also acknowledge our ancestors. We acknowledge all those who toiled without compassion or compensation. We acknowledge all the elders and community stalwarts whose shoulders we stand on as we build, share, learn together for our collective liberation and sovereignty. So, Victoria, once again, we are so honored to have you. Thank you so much. And we wish you a wonderful day and week and month and years to come. Thanks again.
Thanks so much, Matt. Thank you.
All right. Have a wonderful day. Bye.
You too. My pleasure to be with you.